Look at this, not briefly, not in passing. Stop and let your eyes adjust, because what you are looking at is not a painting, it is a labyrinth in which, over 500 years, hundreds of art historians, theologians, psychoanalysts, and ordinary people who risked looking too closely have gotten completely lost. One of the first viewers, Antonio de Beatus, secretary to the Spanish cardinal, saw this triptych in 1517 in the palace of Count Henry III in Brussels. In his diary, he recorded that he had seen diverse and fantastical things depicting seas, heavens, forests, fields, and much more. But when he tried to describe the details, words simply failed him. He wrote, "Things so pleasing and fantastic that it is impossible to describe them in any way to one who has not seen them." This is The Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch, a triptych that, from the moment of its creation, has refused to be understood. Let us try to work out how it is constructed. We begin with what we do not know. We do not know exactly when it was painted. Bosch created it probably in the 1490s. Dendrochronology of the oak panels and stylistic parallels with his other works support that dating. We do not know for certain who it was made for. We do not know where it originally hung. The triptych format points to an altarpiece function, but the frank sensuality of the central panel makes a church destination practically impossible. And most importantly, we do not know what Bosch actually meant to say. Some scholars read the triptych as a continuous eschatological narrative, from the creation of the world to the destruction of humanity. Others argue that the central panel is a utopian paradise of pleasure, in which the artist's imagination runs free of all moral constraint. A third camp insists that it is a false paradise, a visual trap that seduces the viewer in exactly the way the fruits depicted in it seduce the naked figures. The one thing we know for certain, this work resists any final interpretation, so let us at least walk through it, panel by panel. When the triptych is closed, you see a monochrome grisaille. The earth, enclosed in a glass sphere, floats in absolute emptiness. This is the third day of creation from the book of Genesis. The waters have been separated from the land. Plants have appeared, but there is no sun yet, no moon. That is why Bosch strips the outer panels of color. Light has not yet been created. The world exists, but it is not yet visible. In the upper left corner, a tiny figure of God the Father in a tiara resembling a papal crown. He sits far away, at the very edge, and his gesture looks almost hesitant, as though the world he has created is already beginning to slip beyond his control. On his knees rests a Bible, as if he needs a script to see the creation through to its end. 2 Latin inscriptions on the panels read, "For he spoke, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast." Psalm 33, verse 9. But notice, this is not a quotation from Genesis. It is a poetic rendering of the creation story from the Psalms of David. Already here, on the closed panels, Bosch is declaring, "Everything you are about to see inside is also an interpretation my own." You open the triptych, and the monochrome silence explodes into color. The left panel, the Garden of Eden, in the foreground, God, Adam, and Eve. God, whose appearance deliberately echoes Christ, holds Eve by the wrist and presents her to Adam, who has just awakened. Adam sits with his eyes wide open, stunned by the beauty of the creature that appeared while he was unconscious. This is not the scene of the fall. There is no apple, no expulsion. Bosch depicts the moment theologians associated with the institution of marriage, God bringing woman to man and blessing their union. But the serpent is already here. It quietly coils around the trunk of a palm tree in the center of the panel, patiently waiting its hour. Behind Eve, rabbits bustle, a traditional symbol of fertility. On the other side, a dragon tree, which some researchers consider a symbol of eternal life. At the center of the panel rises a fantastical fountain of paradise. A pinkish organic structure, covered in protrusions, rises from a shimmering blue lake. and at its very heart, like the pupil of an eye, a dark opening. In that opening sits an owl. In the medieval imagination, this is the bird of darkness, a symbol of sin and spiritual blindness. Its presence here sounds like a warning. Sin is already inside paradise. The real and the fantastical are utterly indistinguishable here, and that is not accidental. It is the method. The horizon of the left panel flows seamlessly into the central one. The landscape continues as if we have simply taken one step forward. But what is happening here is not a continuation of paradise. It is its perversion. Hundreds of naked figures, men and women, dark-skinned and light, fill every centimeter of the surface. They eat enormous fruits, climb inside the shells of mollusks, ride birds that dwarf horses. Strawberries and cherries, the size of a human head, are passed from hand to hand, devoured with the insatiability of nestlings opening their beaks. Fray José de Sigüenza, the librarian of the Escorial, in 1605 gave this panel a definition that has held for centuries. He compared it to Bosch's other triptych, the hay wain, and wrote that if the hay wain speaks of vanity through the image of dry grass, then the garden speaks of it through the image of the strawberry, a fruit that barely leaves a taste on the tongue, a pleasure that vanishes in the moment of consumption. The entire central panel is a flavor that dissolves before it reaches the palate. But the fruits in Bosch are not simply food. They are too large, too luscious, too fragile. They are held, passed, bitten into. People hide inside them, seem to be born from them. This is not a harvest, it is the raw material of desire. And almost all of these fruits are berries or soft fruits, things that bruise, run, and rot. Pleasure here is built from the very beginning as something that cannot last. The same is true of the animals. They are not background or decoration. They become vehicles, partners, witnesses, sometimes almost extensions of the human body. Birds, fish, mollusks, unicorns, boars, all of nature is drawn into the same circle of longing. In this garden, humanity no longer rules over the created world. It dissolves into it. At the center of the composition, a circular pond filled with bathing women. Around them, moving counterclockwise, a procession of men on horseback riding horses, camels, unicorns, griffins, boars. This carousel recalls late medieval allegories of the 7 deadly sins, where each sin rides the animal that symbolizes it: pride on a lion, lust on a pig, greed on a wolf. And in the background, rising from the water, 5 fantastical architectural structures. The central one resembles the Fountain of Paradise from the left panel, with one critical difference. It is broken, cracked. Where the owl sat in the paradise fountain, human legs and figures now writhe in openly carnal poses. The passage from the sacred to the carnal is executed by Bosch with surgical precision. But look more closely at nature itself. It too is wrong. Birds swim in the water while fish crawl across the land and fly through the air. The familiar forms of nature are suspended inside Bosch's imagined nature. This is a world in a state of perpetual becoming, and the only thing absent from it is death. In one of the strangest fragments of the panel, a man and a woman are enclosed inside a transparent glass sphere, a fragile bubble separating their private world from the chaos around them. Bosch seals intimacy in glass, as if warning, everything that seems protected can shatter at any second. Notice that there are no children in this garden. People emerge from fruits and eggshells already fully formed, as if spared the ordeal of birth. Their doll-like bodies are so stripped of individuality that Hans Belting called them naked souls. We are looking at a humanity we do not recognize, a utopia that never existed. But there is one figure that breaks from the collective delirium. In the lower right corner of the panel, behind a large glass vessel, sits a blonde woman. She rests her head on her hand in a gesture of melancholy. Her mouth is tightly closed. In her other hand, an untouched apple. Beside her stands a man, the only clothed figure in the entire panel. He looks directly at the viewer and points at the woman with one finger, like a silent commentator. However we read this scene, it scratches the flawless surface of the whole fairy tale, because here, consciousness appears, an awareness of the difference between good and evil that, according to the Bible, did not exist before the fall. The right panel hits you like a blow. Daylight disappears. Nature disappears. All that remains is civilization turned against itself. Burning cities are reflected in black water. Crowds of refugees trudge through the night along roads while enemy armies are already approaching the next city to put it to the torch. Bosch paints these scenes with the realism of personal experience. Such fires truly blazed in his own world. This hell is sometimes called the musical hell, for the abundance of instruments turned into instruments of punishment. Lute, harp, bagpipe, everything that brought pleasure above is here used to torment those who devoted their lives to worldly music. Pleasure becomes suffering. Music becomes punishment. The world is literally turned upside down. And here is the detail that has become one of the most discussed in the entire triptych. On the buttocks of a sinner sprawled on the floor beside a choir of the damned, Bosch painted actual musical notation. Contemporary musicians have repeatedly transcribed it, and it does indeed play. This may be the most harrowing score in the history of music, literally written on human flesh. Beside the musical instruments, a gambling table. A gambler is nailed to the table at which he lost everything. A beast-like demon strangles him, holding a shield on which a severed hand balances a die on 2 fingers. The dice have been cast. The game is over. A little further, gossips are submerged in icy water punishment, mirroring the coldness of their own souls. Higher up the panel, 2 giant severed ears, clamping a knife blade between them, roll forward, crushing everything in their path. Ears made to hear, turned into a blind instrument of destruction. One more inversion in a world where every organ of sense is turned against its owner. At the center of the panel rises one of the most mysterious figures in the history of painting, the Tree Man. His body is a hollow tree trunk, balanced on 2 boats. Inside that trunk, a tavern half-naked people sitting at a table, waiting as demons serve them toads and other abominations. On his head, a flat disc with a bagpipe, and his face gaunt, ironic, with a sidelong glance is, according to many researchers, a self-portrait of Bosch himself. The artist placed himself in hell, not as a sinner, but as an observer, as the one who looks at you from the very center of the nightmare and silently asks, "Well, do you recognize it?" Below sits the Prince of Hell, a monster with a bird's head, swallowing sinners and immediately expelling them from its own body. And in the very lower right corner, a pig in a monastic veil, kissing a naked man and compelling him to sign a contract transferring his property to the church. An assistant stands ready with a seal. This is not a depiction of hellish punishment. It is a direct accusation thrown in the face of the clergy. And here is the problem. In 500 years, not one researcher has managed to produce an answer that has satisfied all the others. Falkenberg considers the triptych's overarching theme to be the fate of humanity, with the central panel a false paradise deceiving the senses. Van Bruijn sees a carnal interpretation of the divine commandment to be fruitful and multiply. Belting reads the central panel as a utopia, the world as it might have been had the fall not occurred. Margaret Sullivan proposes that the entire triptych is the dream of the Antichrist, steering the world toward ruin from the very beginning. And Meinhard Michael advanced the theory that the central panel is the dream of the specific woman depicted in the lower right corner who, upon waking, comes to understand the horror of her own sins. Bosch's forms, as Falkenberg wrote, contain no fixed meaning. They are visual anchors of chains of association that constantly risk being broken by the very interpretive impulse they generate. Fallen images, that is what he calls them. Fallen in the sense that Satan fell from his original state. Perhaps that is Bosch's genius. He created a work that cannot be closed. Not physically the panels close, but intellectually, interpretively, this triptych remains open forever. Every viewer enters the labyrinth. Every viewer exits with a different story. Antonio de Beatis could not find the words. Fray José de Sigüenza found the strawberry. Falkenberg found a broken mirror. Belting found a utopia. Sullivan found the dream of the Antichrist. Michael found a woman waking inside a nightmare. You will find something too, but it will be your own discovery. If you are drawn to the secrets of paintings and their hidden meanings, subscribe. See you in the next episode.